and you will all receive a copy of this recording once the session is over. You will also receive a copy of the presentation slides for today. And yeah, without further ado, I'll be sharing with you today on the research tools on Scopus and how you can actually increase your citations by choosing a good journal to publish in. So the first thing that I would share with you in today's session would be to talk about the qualities of journals which are indexed on Scopus and how they are actually being indexed. The second one would be to identify which journals are currently on Scopus. The third section will be talking about Scopus journal metrics in very, very thorough detail, including CiteScore and SNIP, Scimago journal ranking, how you can leverage the research metrics on Scopus to choose a good journal to publish in, and how you can use Scopus Analytics when you're choosing a journal. And a subsequent part of today's session would also be to talk about Scopus article level metrics in greater details. And towards the end of the session, we can run kind of like a live session where I can probably do a couple of searches on some journals that you might be interested in. And in which case, I would suggest that you copy and paste it in the chat box, and then we can do a live session. All right. Okay. Without further ado, let's talk about the qualities of journals on Scopus and how Scopus actually does what it does. So we work together with 7,000 publishers globally. We index approximately about 25,000 serial titles, and as a result, and 234,000 books. And as a result, we get up to over 82 million items. So this has grown by a tremendous amount. When I joined Elsevier, probably about maybe 6 years back, it was just 17 million. In the course of over 6 years, we have about 12 million additional items added onto Scopus. This is fantastic. We talk about how crucial author profiles were, and we had about 17 million that were added previously, and we have over 80,000 affiliation profiles. So with the tools and metrics on Scopus, you can now identify and analyze which journals you can read, you should read, and which ones you should submit to. I think that's actually very useful, right? Because it's one thing to know the journals are indexed on Scopus. The other thing is to know what is the quality and standard of these journals that you're reading about. You're able to track and assess a researcher's impact. You can decide what, where, and with whom to collaborate with. You can track the impact of research and to monitor global research trends. This one is really useful because when you type in like a subject keyword like COVID-19, for instance, you're able to find out what areas the current latest area of research is moving into, what you can actually find out more about as well. You can find out about current research, about what has been published in the current area, in the current research area, so you can find out how to add on to the area of research. And now you can differentiate research topics, find new ideas, find interesting ideas that other people in the world will be interested in too. So how Scopus actually does this is that we work and we provide a strong framework for evaluation by sharing data with QS University rankings, Times Higher Education rankings, for instance. And USM, I'm sure most of you are very aware, has fared very well on the Times Higher Education impact rankings, ranking about top 34, I think, in the world based on impact research. Scopus shows metrics, and in today's session, we'll be talking about publication and usage metrics. We show a very global, comprehensive view of the world of research. We are a representative, curated data sets of research sources that are continuously updated, and there's a very strong quality in terms of journals which are selected and indexed on Scopus. And this is why we are being leveraged on throughout the rest of the world, including especially in Asia Pacific. We look at TCI in Thailand, Beijing University, NRF in Korea, Keio University, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, as well as over here in Malaysia, Malaysian Citation Center, together where you leverage on Scopus data as well. We work together with QS University Rankings, Times Higher Education, Shanghai Jiao Tong University, and Nikkei TrendyNet. And the people who are responsible for the curation of this is what we call the Content Selection and Advisory Board. These are all independent journal editors around the world who are subject matters in their own field, and they're the ones who decide which journals are good enough to be indexed on Scopus. So first and foremost, all Scopus titles actually need to meet all these 5 criteria first before they can be considered for the Scopus review. They need to be peer-reviewed, they need to have English abstracts, they need to be published regularly, they need to have Roman script references, and they need to issue a publication ethics statement. And then the eligible titles is only here. This is what we call the title suggestion. And it's only when the title suggestions are all met, then they are reviewed by the CSAB according to this 14 selection criteria in terms of journal policy, in terms of content quality, in terms of journal standing, in terms of publication regularity, and online availability. So journal policy basically shows that you need to have a convincing editorial concept and policy. You need to have peer-reviewed, and you need to have a diverse geographic distribution of editors and authors in terms of journal policy. The second part will be the quality of content, right? What is the potential academic contribution to the subject field that the journal is positioned in? Are the abstracts clear? Are they readable? Do they align with the aims and scope of the journal? And the articles readable? Are they citable, for instance? We also then have journal standing, where we talk about the citedness of journal articles in Scopus, and together with the editor's standing as well. Publication schedule has to be regular without any delay, and then it also has to be available online in an English language homepage. So what Scopus is committed to is to create a representative curated dataset of scholarly content, where we select the journals based on the journal level data and performance, and where we always monitor and deselect titles which are predatory in nature, or they may be below standards. But the one thing that Scopus cannot do or interfere in is in terms of the editorial autonomy of the journals. So decisions on the quality of articles and conferences, these are actually decided by the editors of the journal. They are responsible for the content of the articles and abstracts in that journal itself. We cannot control nor moderate plagiarism and other publication or malpractice, as well as authorship of the paper. So we have been talking about predatory journals in Malaysia for some time, and I'm aware that this is actually a very key topic, especially in the past couple of months. But one of the key things people always want to know is, what is the definition of a predatory journal, right? It's a very contentious point of view. So what has been done is that in 2019, a group of researchers met to define what predatory publishing is, and they came to a consensual decision where they say predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship, and they're characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practice, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. So a very key part of this statement is basically entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship. Something very, very crucial that we want to talk about. Most of you probably would have heard of Beall's List. This was developed back in 2010. And back then, it was kind of like an unofficial guardian of predatory publishing, where they listed questionable scholarly open access. What happens is that Beall's definition of predatory journals would be to prey on, and it's usually directed at unsuspecting and young scholars, where they would submit their manuscripts for the sole purpose of making money from these scholars. So remember what we talked about is titles. Predatory journals are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship, right? This is exactly what that definition was meant to be. But there were definitions because there was some criticism for Beall because this was not exactly aligned and not everyone agreed with his definition. Beall's List was developed based on one librarian's perspective on this, right? And we all agree that when it comes to predatory publishing, it can be rather gray. This is a real thing. which is why the website has closed back on the 17th of January in 2017. So what Scopus has done actually would be a couple of things. One thing that people always point out is that there are poor quality journals indexed on Scopus, right? Why is this the case? And the answer is simple. They may have a lower than average performance, but they could still be relevant to cover in Scopus. And this includes very niche journals. Basically, journals published in, research published in these journals could still be of very high relevant quality. And these journals do not necessarily need to be removed from Scopus because they could still be relevant in the future. One thing. One thing that we do note is that predatory journals are a threat to science and they should be avoided to be covered in Scopus. And usually what happens is that journals that are included in Scopus benefit from wider global visibility, which increases impact and quality, right? But sometimes this doesn't happen and the journal may become predatory. Sometimes the editors change, sometimes the approach changes, right? So a journal that was formerly indexed on Scopus could 100% become predatory over time. But this is why we always monitor and we have a discontinuation of titles, as I'm sure most of you are aware of. So one thing that we know is that when it comes to making decisions about research, it's very important that these decisions are based on data that we can definitely trust. Therefore, predatory journals are a threat to the integrity of Scopus and science in general. But one thing that we know is that because predatory journals are very ill-defined and they are subject to personal interpretation, independent reviews of journals by experts is therefore essential. So this is why the entire online title review process is so crucial. We have over here the title suggestion, where the publishers are the ones selecting it. We have the editors-in-chief, the board members. They are the ones who suggest the titles over to us, right? This is what we call a title suggestion form. And then it goes to the validation, where we have a newly suggested title, where we do a minimum criteria check and we do a feedback. When the criteria is met, then the title is enriched and then before being released to the content selection and advisory board for their review. The subject chair will then do the review here, and then they will ascertain if the quality is good enough before we release it out for Scopus to be indexed on Scopus. What we do is that we also have a very, very rigorous re-evaluation process and criteria, where less than half the titles are selected for Scopus coverage. So the content selection advisory board is very selective and strict on quality. What happens is that every year we get maybe approximately about 3,500 titles. Excuse me. Only about 40% meets the minimum criteria. And then when we filter down, only 46% of this 39% are then selected for the CSAB's team. And so we have about 630 titles that are added per year. So this is actually something that we take a very strict approach to. And so for those of you who are wondering, yes, if the journal is actually rejected or it doesn't fulfill the criteria, what happens is that they are then placed on an embargo period, right? So this is what happens. So this is for the selection criteria. And then another strict process that we do is what we call a re-evaluation process. So we have titles that will constantly be re-evaluated. About maybe 128 would be still met, 105 would just be rejected. So one thing that we want to know about this re-evaluation process, and because I know some of you will probably face this at some point when it comes to Scopus, because you say that, hey, I published in a journal that was indexed in Scopus, but the journal doesn't appear or my article doesn't appear. Why? Very simple. One thing that we do to make sure that we continuously ensure high quality content is to constantly curate our database. So if there's direct feedback from users and stakeholders on poor performing journals, if the journals are not performing well based on metrics and benchmarks, we have developed a radar to predict the journals with outlying performance. If it doesn't fulfill a certain criteria, it would then be re-evaluated by the CSAB, and then it will be discontinued from Scopus. We'll talk more about this later on. But essentially what happens is that we have a transparent annual re-evaluation process to ensure titles are always meet high quality publication standards. So for the first year, we will analyze our entire Scopus performance based on metrics and benchmarks. If there are journals that are underperforming, we will flag it. We will then tell journal publishers to watch out on this. The second step which we'll do is to do a second one as well. So you can do an analysis of the second performance based on metrics and benchmarks again. We'll flag the underperforming journals, and then we'll inform journal publishers again. But if a journal is underperforming for 2 years in a row, the CSAB will reevaluate the title based on the Scopus selection criteria. We will flag journals for which the concerns are raised, and then we'll reevaluate the title based on the selection criteria. And then this is where we decide to either carry on with the forward flow or to discontinue the forward flow. So this is what we do, right? We constantly monitor, we flag, and then we curate. So this is actually what we do actually. Another thing that we do is to constantly monitor discontinued titles, and we break it down by identification. So since 2016, we have been reevaluated about 1,000 titles, right? Where 44% were from publication concerns, 33% were underperforming, 12% had outlier performance, 11% had were continuously curated. And we actually have discontinued a fairly significant number of titles based on the process. But what it also means is that we don't discontinue all the titles, right? Because we want to take a very measured and approach to understanding this. So this is something that we do to a very high level too. So since 2016, we have discontinued about 536 titles. Some benchmarks that we do on our side would include self-citation. We talk about citation rate. We talk about CiteScore, the number of articles, the number of clicks, and the abstracts usage. So all these are very granular level of details, but let me walk you through very quickly on how exactly it is that we emphasize the quality of content on Scopus. So if there is a high self-citation rate, about 2 times higher compared to peer journals in the subject field, the journal might be slightly dubious, right? Because why would you otherwise have such a high self-citation rate? 1. 2, we have also a total citation rate. If the journal receives half the number of citations or less when compared to peer journals in its subject field, because it shows that you're not getting enough citation, it's not being recognized. If the CiteScore is low, if it has a CiteScore half or less than the average CiteScore when compared to peer journals in the subject field, placing this in the lower quartile of the journals, maybe this is not too good for the journal itself, right? It's something that we'll pay attention to. We also want to track the number of articles when the journal produces less or half the number of articles compared to peer journals in the subject field. If the tags they use half as often, and if the abstracts are seen less half as often as peer journals in the subject field. This is why we actually categorize it by subject areas, and I'll talk more about this later on. So we have what we call a radar, which is a Elsevier-made data analytics algorithm trained to identify outlier journal behavior in the Scopus database. Outlying journal examples includes rapid changes to articles published or unexplainable changes in geographic diversity of authors' affiliations. So the tool constantly improves by new examples or rules, and it will run once a year where we can check the full Scopus journal base of about 22,000 titles for outlier behavior. The journals that are flagged by the radar tool will also be added to the re-evaluation process, and they will be re-evaluated in the year of identification by the radar tool. So upon completion, we will then decide whether to continue a journal's coverage or to discontinue the forward flow of the journal coverage in Scopus. A journal can also be flagged for re-evaluation based on publication concerns by either the publisher or the journal level, and the concerns for such journals are identified by Scopus or flagged to Scopus by the research community. If the concern is legitimate, the title will then be added to the re-evaluation program to be re-evaluated based on the concern. So this is actually what we do on our side. Okay, a very common question here everyone asks is, how do I know which journals are in Scopus? It's actually quite straightforward. If you go to the source list, right, if you can actually go here and you can download the Scopus source list, this is updated on a monthly basis. So you can download the entire source list based on source titles or by source titles and metrics. So I know this is a massive file. It's about maybe about 70 megabytes, but it's very, very detailed. So you can take a look at this. So a very common question we get also is what happens for when the decision is made to be discontinued. And the publisher is informed of the decision by the Scopus team. No new content is added to Scopus except for journals that are flagged because of publication concerns, because the journals are put on hold during the review process. The content already indexed remains as a matter of scientific record to ensure stability and consistency of research trend analytics. So one thing is that, yes, even though the journal may be discontinued, previously indexed materials will still remain in place because, it doesn't mean that all research that he has done before should not be validated. It should probably still maintain there. What we do is we stop what we call the forward flow of the indexing process. It's only in exceptional cases of proven severe unethical practice that content already indexed can then be removed. And CiteScore will not be given for discontinued titles. One thing that we do is that an overview of all discontinued journals, including the last content index on Scopus, is available on the discontinued source list. So we have been hearing what people have been saying, which is why we are updating our source content list on a monthly basis. So feel free to check this on a monthly basis to make sure that the journals you're thinking of publishing in are still indexed on Scopus. Okay, so another part that I want to talk about is that how you probably want to find a journal. So how you actually want to find a journal in the first place would be to start a search by consulting and extending your network. You can ask colleagues and peers for their recommendations that they're aware of. You may get insight from a supervisor, mentor, and authors that you read, or you can ask your local librarian, right? This is something you can do. You can also search for online scholarly resources by looking at the articles which you have cited that were published. When you note the journals referenced in the bibliography of key research areas in your field, and when you search for authors in your field and discover where exactly that they are publishing in. You also want to consider a couple of things. What is my manuscript format? Is it an original research article or review? Do I want to or do I need to publish open access? Am I looking to publish in a title with a multidisciplinary or an interdisciplinary focus? Do I want to publish with a specific publisher per se? And am I publishing research data or other outputs alongside the article? I like to say what we like to do is for you to actually start with the end in mind, right? So what exactly is it that you're looking to publish and in what nature? So you need to ask yourself all these questions. So there are 7 key questions to consider as you evaluate the journals that you have identified. I think it's a very good summary. Firstly, is the manuscript the right fit for the journal? Is my research article something that the journal I'm submitting to, something that they'll like to consider in as well? Are there any funder or institutional mandates to consider? Like in Malaysia, you have FMCG, so you need to consider all these grants as well. Is the journal a very key journal in the community in the research community that I'm in, that I want to publish towards so that they can read? Ask yourself this question. Is there a very reasonable chance of acceptance? Ask yourself, if I'm publishing to this journal, would it be accepted? There's no point if you're an early career researcher, if you want to publish in, say, Nature or Lancet or Cell straight away, because the chances of acceptance might not be as high, right? What is the value of your research to these journals as well? You need to ask yourself all these questions. Is the journal indexed in all of the relevant databases? And what do the journal metrics review? What do they tell us? So we'll talk about this later in today's session. And lastly, is the journal reputable? Does it practice very robust peer review? These are 7 key questions that you need to consider, right? And I have broken down into this into very granular detail, but I'm not sure if we have time to go through all this, right? But let me go through this briefly. So scope, is the manuscript the right fit for the journal? you need to research the journal's aims and scope, and you can find this on the publisher websites where details can be found. You can look on recent articles and assess whether or not your paper is a good fit, right? So make sure that you always do this homework. You want to ask yourself, what are the subject areas covered? What are types of articles discovered? What are the disciplines covered? Whether it's a regional or global journal per se. You also probably want to select journals which are aligned with the trends, right? Where new articles are emerged, usually with journals developed specifically to publish them. So you should take a look at this as well. So with regards to funder and institutional mandates, you want to make sure the journal aligns with the funder or the institutional requirement regarding publication. And this will explain options around open access, data publication, and use of persistent identifiers. And publishers' websites will provide the information on how to comply with specific funding body mandates. Always check the aims and scope for information on readership. In the case of Elsevier, journals will display a map showing where the journal content has been downloaded, and this can be accessible via the journal insights. Check whether colleagues and mentors read and recommend the journal. You need to find out if the journal's papers are indexed in databases relevant to your research area. And don't publish in journals that are not reaching audiences who can benefit from your work. Ask yourself, is there a reasonable chance of acceptance? Look for the acceptance and rejection rate and then factor it into your decision-making process. And for Elsevier journals, we'll talk about Elsevier Journal Finder, where you can find this as well. So one thing that you probably want to do is that sometimes you probably want to submit a journal with the highest impact metrics, but one thing that you should also know that these journals with the highest impact metrics would also have a high rejection rates, right? So you need to understand and do a cost benefit analysis with regard to this. Is the journal indexed by the relevant databases? Correct. You want to make sure the journals is indexed on Scopus or Web of Science. And then you want to find out what is it that the metrics review so that you can compare journals to specific citation metrics. And lastly, you need to ask yourself, is the journal itself reputable, right? We have COPE and we have the World Association of Medical Editors, where publication ethics and standards do not conflict with predatory journals. So one thing that you should also know is that you want to be very careful when paying attention to predatory journals. So for instance, if the journals itself actively and aggressively solicit submissions, often for a fee, then you should be concerned about it. The call for paper emails will contain spelling and grammar errors. If the journal has a short publication history with 4 issues or less, even though the journal has existed for several years, this might be an issue as well. If the scope is very broad or the content published doesn't match its aims and scope, and if it offers rapid publications within 48 hours or a week, right? So these are some things that you probably want to bear in mind when you're looking at a predatory journal. And then ask yourself one more question. Ask yourself, is a journal reputable, and check with the librarian if any questions. Is it listed in the journal finder tools and databases? Is it enrolled in the community on publication ethics? That's quite useful. Can you tell who owns the journal? Who is the publisher? If the journal is published by a well-known reputable society, press or publishing house, if it's obvious who the editors are, if they perform peer review, if the APCs and the timing of fees clear, and if the publisher provides detail about open access license and their conditions. These are some of the things you need to bear in mind, right? Okay, so bearing in mind all this, there's even more information. I'll leave it to you because we are really running short on time. Okay, now back to Scopus journal metrics, right? The bread and butter for what you're here for. There's 3 key metrics that we leverage over in Elsevier on Scopus. One would be CiteScore, the other would be SNIP, the thirdly would be on SciMargo journal ranking. What is the difference between all 3? CiteScore is a metric that gives a very comprehensive, transparent, and current view of a journal's impact. It uses a 4-year citation window and is calculated using data from Scopus. And CiteScore metrics would help to validate citations which are received by journals and proceedings, to empower users with information to make well-informed decisions regarding where to publish. I'll give you a breakdown in terms of how we calculate CiteScore later. We also have here SNIP, which is a source normalized impact per paper. And this measures contextual citation impact by weighing citations based on the total number of citations in the subject field. The impact of a single citation is given a higher value in a subject area where citations are less likely and vice versa. So what SNIP does is that it compares this journal with other journals in the same subject area, right? And it's comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges. Because one, while you're able to have CiteScore, like to have a raw calculation, right? Citation based on citations weighted on the citations itself, you want to also do a weightage. So if you're comparing two journals, say a medicine journal and then say a mathematics journal, right? The total number of citations you're getting from both journals will be completely different, right? The medicine journal very likely would have higher number of citations compared to the mathematics journal. This is just par for the course and it's just based on subject discipline behavior. But the one thing that we have to bear in mind is this is because the nature of the subject areas are different. So what you want to do for SNIP on what we have done is that we've compared this medicine journal to the global average of medicine journals, this mathematics journal to the global average of mathematics journals. It is only then that we are able to make a informed decision where we're able to do a weightage comparison, right? So the impact of a single citation is given a higher value in subject areas. In terms of SJL, we talk about SciMargo Journal Rank, and this is a prestige metric which is applied to journals, book series, and conference proceedings. With SJL, the field, quality, and reputation of the journal have an effect on the value of a citation, and there's a readily understandable scale with an average of 1 for comparison. Last year, actually in 2020 itself, we have launched a new CiteScore methodology called CiteScore 2019. And what it does is that we actually have changed this so that we look at the citations to articles, reviews, conference papers, book chapters, and data papers published in 4 years from 2016 to 2019. And is divided by the articles, reviews, conference papers, chapters, and data papers published in the same span of time. So it's essentially a very straightforward, clear, transparent calculation of citations to documents, right? This is something we should do. CiteScore gives good clarity, currency, and comprehensiveness, right? We cover about 25,000 titles, over 330 disciplines. We work and leverage on a lot of data so we can provide you this information that you're looking for. We also have what we call like SciMargo journal ranking, right? Which we call prestige data comparison. And the one thing that which SJL does is that it uses Scopus as the data source for the development of the SJL indicator because it best represents the overall structure of world science at a global scale. SJL looks at the prestige of a journal and is considered as indicated by considering the sources of the citations to wit rather than its popularity as measured by simply counting all citations equally. So one thing that I want to emphasize here is it looks at the sources of the citations, right? So each citation received by a journal is assigned a weightage based on the SJL of the citing journal. So a citation from a journal with a high SJL value is worth more than a citation from a journal with a low SJL value. So what it says is that basically not all citations are equal. Some are more equal than others, right? So in this case, you can see that the weightage varies accordingly. Thus, citations coming from higher important journals would therefore be more valuable and they'll give more prestige to the journals receiving them accordingly. And what SJL also does is that it normalizes for differences in citation behavior between subject field areas. So in the Life Science Journal, you can see that there's high impact and many citations, where one citation represents lower value. When it comes to the Arts and Humanities journals, a low impact and there's few on citations. One citation represents higher value accordingly. So this is something that you should know when it comes to the calculation, when it comes to SciMargo Journal ranking, SJR. Where you are able to see all these metrics is best leveraged on when you go to the Scopus source, the source tab on the Scopus that you're at right now, So you see some very key details over here that I like to talk about. Firstly, we talk about the journal title. We can see that the coverage years of the journal and the publisher accordingly. So this is actually very important, and they're all very crucial details that you should pay attention to. The other thing that I will point out is please look at the ISSN value. The ISSN value is DOI, is the identifier of the journal. It shows clearly which journals are real and which ones are not. I've seen journals, predatory journals, actually real ones shared to me by librarians, where the title of a journal is exactly the same, but the ISSN is completely different. So you want to be very clear and careful when you're choosing a journal, when you look at the ISSN. The next thing that you talk about will be to look at the CiteScore value, the SJR value, and the SNIP value. And this is some of the metrics that we talk about, right? And we can see in terms of Lancet in 2019 is CiteScore value of about 73.4, which is really high. We can see that it has received 122,000 citations for 1,679 documents. But then we take a look at, say, 2020, right? And we notice something else. We notice that this value now is 90.9, which is crazy. We have about 146,000 citations coming from almost exactly the same number of documents from 1,609 documents to date. So we can see that in terms of the documents published, it's actually very consistent, right? It's just that there's more citations, and some of you may be wondering, why is it that there are more citations? Well, it's probably because Lancet publishes a lot of key research on COVID-19, right? For instance. The one thing that we also observe is that look at the last updated date, which is on the 6th of April, 2021, and this is updated on a monthly basis. I just extracted this yesterday, so this is actually a very fresh updated copy. So this is something that you should probably know, right? It's likely that it's only in tomorrow or the day after that this CiteScore tracker will be updated. So this is what we call a fixed CiteScore value, and this is what we call a dynamic CiteScore value. And the fixed CiteScore value is calculated on the 6th of May of 2020, almost exactly a year ago. Yeah. We can see in this case, Lancet is actually number 1 out of 529 titles in the area of general medicine. And this is what I want to bring your attention to, right? You take a look at the fixed CiteScore, you talk about the dynamic CiteScore to see how well it's currently trending, and we talk about the CiteScore percentile rankings in 2019, something you should want to know. So sometimes when you're publishing and you want to choose a journal to publish in, maybe you're not looking for the top journal per se, right? Maybe you're looking at the top 10. Maybe you're looking at quartile 1. Maybe you're looking for quartile 1 and then quartile 2, right? These are some of the considerations that you're looking at when you're considering for MIRA. MIRA 1 and MIRA 2. So you can look at, say, maybe the top 10 journals, right? In terms of general medicine, you have Lancet, you have the New England Journal of Medicine, you have JAMA, you have Nature Reviews, you have Lancet Global Health, you have Translational Medicine, you have PLOS Medicine, etc., right? All this, they're always around, and something for you to bear in mind when you're looking for Q1 journals to publish in, right? We call it Q1 because they are in the top 99th percentile to the 76th percentile, right? And then quartile 2 will be from up to the top 51 percentile. For instance, something for you to know. So you can play around with this tool. This is what we call the journal trend tool. I think it's really powerful, and I think it's something that you probably want to pay attention to when you're choosing a journal to publish in. The other thing that we have here is what we call a journal source analyzer tool, right? So maybe you're looking for, say, 4 journals that you want to compare: the Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, which is a Journal of American Medical Association, as well as PLOS Medicine, right? And then you compare all the metrics that you can take a look at. We have a lot of metrics in Scopus, right? We compare it accordingly to, say, publication, CiteScore. So we can see how well CiteScore, the journal has been performing on CiteScore from 2011 to 2019. we can see how well they are trending. We can see in 2019, Lancet overtook New England Journal of Medicine, which has been trending very highly for the past couple of years. We then take a look at the Go journal ranking, right? And we can see that the New England Journal of Medicine trends very high, probably a bit higher by Lancet. And some of you will be wondering, why is it that the metrics look different? It's because that's what it is, you know. Based on different calculations, different metrics would tend differently. And one thing that we always point out in Scopus is that we don't really believe in one metric per se. We really believe in actually what we call a basket of metrics. So it's okay if the data don't 100% agree with one another all the time. It's like life, right? You're completely allowed to disagree, but you need to understand why there is a disagreement happening. And then we can see SNIP, right? Source normalized impact per paper. In this case, we can see that Lancet is trending higher, the New England Journal for Medicine dropping a little bit, JAMA trending below it, as well as PLOS Medicine. And then sometimes you also want to take a look at the total number of citations, and we can see that the New England Journal of Medicine has received the most number of citations. And then when you look at, say, the total documents per year, we can see in this case, Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine, together with JAMA, they're all publishing the same number of documents, actually very consistently, at about 1,600 documents per year. And it's all completely consistent. This is actually one of my favorite metric tools. It's what we call the percentage not accepted tool, right? Percentage not cited, sorry. So when we see the percentage not cited, we see how many percent of a journal is in a journal, published journal, how many documents are actually not cited every single year. The idea is that we want to showcase within a journal, how many percent of all its documents were actually being read and being cited, so we can see the valuation of it. So one thing that we want in this case as an example is that if you are, say, an early career researcher, you probably want to publish in a journal which has a very low percentage not cited score, right? Because it really shows that everyone on the journal, everyone reading in that community, reading that journal is citing and reading and citing that article per se. So it's actually very useful, right? So choose a journal itself, which has a very low percentage not documents that are not cited. This is actually very, very useful. I think you might want to consider it. We also have what we call a percentage reviews of articles per year. So we can see how many percent of a journal itself are actually comprised of review articles. So there's some questions that are popping up. Let me address it first before we go on further. Okay, so some of you will be asking, where can you find the journal review? I think you can go on to Scopus, and I think this would actually help you with it. Chick Ramla is asking, how do we identify the top 5% journals in Scopus? Aha, it's a very good question, and something which now I can answer is that if you go to this source over here, right, the top 5% will be in the top 96 percentile onwards, right? We can see in this case, the Lancet itself would have approximately about 99th percentile. We can see it's running up from 97th to 99th. So the top 5% you probably want to take a look at would be to look at 96 percentile onwards. I think that's something actually you can consider doing as well. Pretty useful, but it's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. Yeah. Another question we'll be asking is if there are points for acceptance. I'm not sure if there are points done for attendance, but you will get a certificate after the session is over. So yeah. So in the meantime, please feel free to type in more questions at any point in time. Actually, since we are on this session, why don't I make this a bit more interactive? And we can do a live demonstration, right? So maybe in the Q&A or the chat box, type in a journal that you would like me to take a look at for you. And then we can do a comparison. We can see how well the journal is performing. Shall we do that? I think it'll be fun this way. Okay, so I'll share my desktop itself. So feel free to type in the journals that you're interested in. Let me know. Let me know when you can see my screen. So whenever we are doing this exercise, I would like to point you out, go to scopus.com. I believe you can access this through the library proxy, through Easy Proxy. I think Ancient Kamal has walked you through this before. Go to library proxy, go to the resources, look for Scopus. When you're in Scopus itself, go for sources, and then you can start looking for it. Okay, some examples. You're looking for the Turkish online journal. Okay, Journal of Cleaner Production. I'm very aware of this. Yeah, Journal of Cleaner Production is one of our top journals over at Elsevier. So, and I know many researchers actually from Malaysia have published in the Journal of Cleaner Production. So you can see straight away when we click over here, the Journal of Cleaner Production, it brings you to this page. So we can see the coverage here is 93 to present, published by Elsevier, ISSN here. The CiteScore is 10, the SGR is 1, the SNIP is 2.39. But at the end of the day, what do the metrics tell you? You want to know what's the context, right? So the first thing I would point out for Journal of Cleaner Production is that it's ranked probably about 4th out of 210 in general environmental sciences, 11th out of 427 in terms of business management and accounting, 9th out of 340 titles in terms of engineering for industrial and manufacturing engineering, and 18th out of 179 titles in renewable energy. So if you're talking about top 5%, well, Journal of Cleaner Production is 98th percentile, 97th percentile, and 90th percentile in terms of energy. Then let's take a look at the rank and trend. This one's fun. So if I'm looking at, say, general environmental sciences, I can see that it ranks behind Applied Catalysis B, Annual Review of Environment and Resources, Global Change Biology, and Journal of Cleaner Production. Then if you want to find out more about these other journals, feel free to click on them and then you can find out more about the journals, right? So, well, Applied Catalysis B is published by Elsevier, right? And it's ranked number 1 in terms of environmental science, number 1 in terms of chemical engineering, number 1 in terms of catalysis, right? For instance. So, if you want to publish in these areas of research, Applied Catalysis B for environmental is probably the best journal in this entire area. We also have the annual reviews of environmental and resources. And we also have here Global Change Biology that's being published by Wiley and Blackwell. That's something which we do. Yeah. So yeah, we can take a look at, say, Journal of Cleaner Production, and we can see the impact and the efficacy of it today. So this is something which I think you might be interested in. Someone's asked for, all right, let me try more things. I've heard of the International Journal of Learning, Teaching, and Education Research. Let me take a look at that for you. So International Journal of Learning, Teaching, and Education Research has been quite often asked. It's published by the Society for Research and Knowledge Management and was only very recently indexed from 2018 onwards. We can see that a good news is that the citation count has increased and there are more documents being indexed. But one thing which we observe is that the title itself is ranked in the bottom 70th percentile, ranking in 1,032 titles, 1,032 out of 1,254. Someone's asking for the Turkish journal, or Turkish online journal. I need to take a look at this. This one is new. Turkish online journal. Distance education. I assume this would be it. And the Turkish Online Journal of Distance Education, quickly at a glance, is ranked in the 56th percentile. So Q2, Q1, Q2. And it's also increasing in terms of its citation. It's published by, I guess, a society journal, right? by Anadolu University. It's indexed from 2004 onwards. We can take a look at the CiteScore. It's been around on Scopus for some time, since 2011, and you can probably see that the quality of the journal is actually has been increasing, and it's ranked 548 out of 1254. Then if you want to know more about these journals, you can go to the CiteScore rank and trend, right? And now you can go into further detail to ask yourself, which are the top journals that I'm looking at in this subject category? It could be, say, the review of education research. It could be internet and higher education, computers and education, and educational research review. These are other some journals that in the research area, I assume that you might be interested in, right? Published by Sage, Elsevier, Elsevier, well, and Elsevier, yeah. For instance, I was expecting that. Cleaner production design. So we talk about Bewsley's, and Bewsley's has actually been stopped since I think January 2017, 2018. So Bewsley's has not been updated for a very long time. So how reliable is it? He stopped indexing it and stopped being updated. So I wouldn't use this as the only source of identification. Yeah. Let me take a quick look at the Journal of Multinational Financial Management. And I think there's more as well. So this one is actually doing very well. It's ranked 77th percentile, and it's well published by Elsevier. It's yeah, it's about 60th out of 270 titles, or in terms of economics, econometrics, and finance, and it's ranked 162 out of 637 in economics and econometrics. So it depends on which areas you're looking at. So yeah, I think this journal is actually really good. Congratulations if you have an article index in it. So a couple of questions. The SGL rank journal as Q1, Q2, is that valid? It's based on SGL journal ranking. So it's just a different calculation. What I'm showing you is just one example of CiteScore trends, which I think is actually quite impactful. Go journal ranking is also developed based on journals indexed in Scopus, and they use a very different approach. So is that valid? I would say it depends on who's asking this question, but I would say, yeah, it's a good calculation. It makes sense. It's leveraged on by many people worldwide. Possibly valid. Probably valid. So the other thing is someone's asking, could I share the PowerPoint with everyone? Of course, the PowerPoint will be shared with everyone by the end of the session. Someone's asking why certain journals are no longer in Scopus. So I spent about 30 minutes in the initial part of the presentation talking about it. It's really to make sure that the quality of a journal is always constantly met and upheld. Sometimes journals stop becoming ethical when the editors change. And then when this happens, we can no longer continue to index just journals on Scopus, right? That's one example that we talk about. Why they are also no longer in Scopus? Maybe because sometimes the quality of the journal is not as good as before, right? And we cannot continue to index it. And that's very important because we always want to uphold the quality of the journals that are indexed in Scopus, as well as the publication ethics associated with it. So we always continuously do an evaluation and a re-evaluation every year to make sure that journals are performing to a good standard. Yeah, I hope this answers your question. It's not because that we want to troll people by indexing and then not indexing the journals. It's because that sometimes it's really more or less an ongoing curation itself to make sure that the quality of research content indexed on Scopus is kept to the highest possible standard. And that's what we do. Yeah. So let's try one last example in terms of psychopharmacology. I assume that this will be current. Oh no, it'll be this one. In terms of psychopharmacology, this is ranked in the 80th percentile, right? It's 58 out of 301 titles, right? And it's published by Springer Nature. So yeah, I think it's, and if you want to find out more about this subject area, take a look at it. You can see Nature reviews, pharmacological reviews, drug resistance updates, right? And then you can find out more about all these journals. And it seems to me that Springer Nature is very strong in this area, right? Then you have the American Society for Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics, and drug resistance updates is published by Elsevier. Some of the journals that you can consider looking at. Yeah. So yeah, I think we should go on to the next stage of it. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so we talk about the journal rankings and how you can choose journals to publish in. And thanks a lot for sharing the examples that you guys have did, because I think it's actually very useful as well. The next part that I want to talk about metrics would be to talk about Scopus article level metrics. So you can go into an individual article level, and then you can find out more about the specific research area per se. So we have a couple of metrics that we leverage on. One would be PlumX, which are item level metrics that shows insights that how people can interact with individual pieces of research output. So we can visualize scholarly engagement, and this includes 5 categories of metrics. We talk about usage, we talk about captures, we talk about mentions, social media, as well as citations. One thing that I'll point out to you is all these are color coded. So for instance, green will be usage, purple captures, red citations. So let's take a look at this journal article called A Complex View of Industry 4.0. And we can see this has about 277 citations with a few weighted citation impact of 105. To give you a context, 1 is the global average. So one thing we talked about earlier, we talk about SNIP and we talk about weightage in terms of a subject area. So the PlumX works in the very same way, except it's on the article level, right? So it's an article level comparison based on similar articles based on its subject categories. Now, we can see that if 1 is the global average, 105 places this way above the global average. So you can see the impact of this research article within the community that have cited it. But I would say, please use this example to find out top weightage site articles to find out what are the hottest topics in the areas of research, in your areas of research right now. This is actually a very good way for you to find out what catches people's attention, right? And this is really what boils down to it. You need to find out what catches people's attention, what are areas of research that appeals to people in the current climate, and then maybe you can add on to it, find out how you can value add on to this, right? This is leveraging on research metrics to make an informed decision. You can also use PlumX metrics here to take a look to see what is popular. We can see this article, it has a very huge number of usage, a lot of citations, and a lot of captures. A bit of, I think, a bit of mentions on Twitter as well. You can see under here, social media has been tweeted about 44 times, quite a decent amount. So over here, you can see like more detail. We can see over here how many times it's been cited on a cross-reference, how many times it's been viewed on EBSCO, how many times it's been captured on Mendeley and tweeted. We can see how the citations has been increasing. It was probably published, I think, in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, based on a couple of researchers from Slovenia. And then we can see how this has been gaining traction accordingly. We talk about how you can search for collaborators as well, right? And something we talk about would be, say, if you're looking for, say, Islamic studies, right? We can find out research articles on Islamic studies are published, have very key publishers in institutions like UKM, IIUM, for instance. And then from an international perspective, you have SOAS in London, you have the University of Napoli Oriental, for instance, and these are some of the examples we can find out about who the key trending institutions are. We can also find out who the key authors are, right? Including Professor Hamja, Professor Bakar, Professor Ismail, right? And these are some examples that you can find out when it comes to top collaborators per se. I think we have some questions here. And okay, so before we go on further, let me share with you some appendix. We have been doing a series of online workshops in Malaysia in 2020, and these are some of the content that we have developed along the way. This session is very quite different from some of the content that we covered as well. But in terms of a granular breakdown, we have Scopus search, We have curated content and what's included in Scopus. We have author profiles in Scopus, journal analysis Scopus, metrics analysis, as well as institutional profiles. So we talk about author profiles in Scopus. You were around for the previous session. I think this was useful for you. I hope it was useful for you. We have institutional profiles in Scopus. We keep you updated on the Scopus blog and Twitter. You can use Library Connect to find out about what global programs are being run on overseas. And also, don't forget to talk about Journal Finder. For those of you who don't know, Journal Finder is a free resource which allows you to find journals that are suited for publishing your scientific article. It's powered by the fingerprint engine, and it uses smart search technology and vocabulary to match your article to Elsevier journals. So very simple. Type in your paper title, your abstract, the keywords, select from the drop-down menu in terms of the field of research, and we'll give you a list of journals that you can refine your search by. Maybe you're looking for Go Open Access, maybe you're searching for best searches, maybe, and then you can click onto detail. You can find out about CiteScore, impact factor, the acceptance rate. In this case, Journal of Cleaner Production appears again. You can see the CiteScore of 10.9, field weighted impact factor of 7.246, an acceptance rate of 23%. You have the time to the first decision and the time to publication as well. All the details that you probably need when you're looking for research. And of course, for more information, you can go to Researcher Academy, which is a free to use online portal where it's kind of like Coursera. So you can find out more about topics like research preparation, how you can write research for research, find out more about the publication process, how you can navigate the peer review, and how you can communicate your research. So yeah, thank you so much for your set time today. It's about exactly 12:04 right now. So if you can do me a favor, you can click on this survey to click and complete this survey, and you can find out about the course itself to get a certificate of participation. So we can take the next 5 minutes answering some questions that you have put forward. Let me take a look. Okay, so someone's asking that not all editions of certain journals were indexed, but the journals have been indexed in Scopus for a long time, and only editions from 2 years were not indexed. What could cause this? Okay, so this is a very real problem. Many researchers often ask me this, and the answer is simple. So at the end of the day, Scopus works together with the publishers of the journals, right? So if there are missing issues of the journals which are not indexed in Scopus, the publisher should submit it over to us. But if you feel that there are missing issues, let me know. Send me examples of this. Send me examples of which issues should be indexed in Scopus, and we'll escalate it internally to make sure that all content are indexed in Scopus, and that is if they should be indexed, right? Sometimes there may be reasons why they are not indexed, and the publishers would know why. But usually, if you find that there are missing issues, let us know and we'll investigate this. But that's a very good question, Zaru. Thanks. If you feel that there's any articles missing, let me know and we can check this in. We can launch an investigation into this. Shafiq, how do we search for an expert in the field of research? So just now when I was doing a search on Scopus under Islamic studies, so maybe you want to take a look at keywords in your area of research, right? You could share a keyword, type it in, and then you can do an analyze this. You can do an analysis in terms of the overall research trends. For instance, who are the top researchers? Or for instance, which institutions are the top researchers? So if you like to Shafiq, you can give me an example of an area of research or a very specific keyword relevant to your area of research, and we can run a search, and I can tell you how to do a search for this. So feel free to type in your chat box. In the meantime, I'll answer some questions in the other chat box. Okay, you've already asked it there. The slides will be sent to the library. So Injit Kamal will have a copy of my slides, and then he can distribute it accordingly as well. Someone's asking, what advice would I give to a beginning researcher when looking for a journal? Wow, this is a very complex topic. And I think we spent actually about 30 minutes talking about it. So I think when you're looking for a journal, you need to ask yourself, what is the area of research that my community, okay, first and foremost, what's the definition of the area of research that I'm in? What are the journals that my research community is reading? What are journals that my peers would recommend? What are examples that my supervisor will recommend as well? And then when I'm searching for keywords within my area of research, I can identify which are the top journals which features this as well. So yeah, so it's a very, very long, complicated answer, but I hope fully this session will help you with it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on with the anti-bot verification. I will have to take a look at it later. I'm sorry. Thanks, Faith. Point clouds. Okay, Shafiq, let me run a quick search for you because point clouds is a very new term for me too. So I will share my. So meanwhile, this survey code will still be here. I'm just going to run a quick search on point clouds so that we can take a look at this together. It's very interesting. So first and foremost, you want to search for, say, point clouds here, right? Put it in open inverted commas. We see about 27,000 citations. I'm assuming point clouds is based on robotic automation, right? So maybe right now, if you're looking for, say, the top research areas, let's take in a subject expert area. So I'm assuming that this will be in computer science. We can narrow it downwards. I want to take a look at articles. So I will narrow it even further down. I want to look for, I assume the keyword would be specifically on point cloud, right? Okay, I think there might be some issue with the server website, so no worries. I'll send you the link as well, and then you can just fill it up at your own point in time anyways. So, okay, let's narrow it downwards to point cloud, and I think 3D point cloud. Yeah, so we have enough parameters to work with right now because 27,000 is a lot. So what I've done right now would be to follow it down to specifically narrow it down to point clouds, articles in the areas of computer science. And we're looking at, say, point clouds and 3D point clouds, right? So about 1,500 documents, and then I can analyze the search results over here. So we can see that this has been trending a lot more recently in 2019. It seems to me that that's a very key area of concern. And then when we take a look at, say, documents by affiliation, we can see that there's a lot of publications from Wuhan, from Ministry of Education in China Academy of Sciences, Zhejiang University. Wow, it seems like there's a lot of research coming from China with regards to this, right? So the other thing that you could do is to take a look at, say, the documents by author, right? Who are the authors who have published the most research in? So let's take a look at G. Fosselman. Very interesting. And a Li Jing and a Wang. Yeah. So under G. Fosselman, and he's published a lot of research actually in this area. So we take a look at this. We can see that George Fosselman is in the Faculty of Geoinformation Science and Earth Observation. We can see this is ORCID ID. His H index is really high at 38, right? And we can see in terms of areas of research, his latest areas of research is enhanced trajectory estimate of mobile laser scanners using area images. We can take a look at, this is his constant most recent research. We can see that there's a consistency grammar for 3D indoor modeling checking. Let's take a look at the cited by highest, right? Sorry, it's a bit laggy today. And then we can see that these are some of his top most cited areas. Wow. So his most cited area of research work was back in 2004 in an experimental comparison of filter algorithms for bare extraction from airborne laser point scanning point clouds, a segmentation of point clouds using smoothness constraints, and a slope-based filtering of laser altimetry data, right? So maybe George Fosselman is someone you're looking for here, Shafiq. Looks pretty cool. Yeah. Then maybe you can take a look at, say, Li Jing Lee J. I'm not sure what's his phone. Jonathan Lee. All right. So Jonathan Lee is published from the University of Waterloo in Canada. And it seems to me that his areas of research should be also be quite similar on it, based on mobile LiDAR point clouds, based on hue transform and active contours. Seems he's very active in this. Jonathan Lee's H index is also really high at 43. So if you take a look at it, you see his highest citation. You can find that maybe, you know, the first author for this would be in terms of his highest citation work would be a spectral spatial residual network for hyperspectral image classification. So the other thing that I want to bring your attention to is to go to topics, right? So we can see in terms of point clouds, laser scanning, and LiDAR, these are some of the top authors in these topics as well. You have a Jonathan Lee, a Wang Chen, Yu Yong Tao, a Pedro Arias, and a Hai Yan Guan, right? These are the guys with the topmost documents in these areas of topics. We can even see, let me see what other topics we can take a look at under the author profile page. You have point clouds. Okay, I think this is what you're looking for, right? In this case, under for George Fosselman, you can take a look at here as well. It's still the same. Point clouds, laser scale. Yeah. So the top authors in this area topic will be Jonathan Lee, right? So that's one area of a way that you can actually consider searching for experts in specifically looking for point clouds. Yeah. So I think this should help you with it, Shafiq. Okay. So now there's a bunch of other questions. Okay. So I'm assuming right now that there is a lot of problems with the survey forms. Yes, the survey form is correct title is Research Tools on Scopus and How to Increase Your Citations. That's the probably correct survey form. The workshop code, I would share it with you now. Here you go. So for those of you who are asking on the survey forms and the codes, allow me to actually copy and paste this for you. And here you go. We'll share the survey code and the workshop code with everyone, so not to worry. Here you go. So maybe you can click on the link and the link would actually just bring it much more convenient for you. Yeah. But for those of you who have issues with filling in the survey form, not to worry, feel free to go back to it later on and we'll send it over to you as well, together with the PowerPoint slides, together with the recording link over here as well. So yes, you can probably publish in any journal of interest where the status says to present, but I would also say you would also want to take a look at the metric calculations and how well the journal is performing, because we always do a re-evaluation, right, based on an ongoing basis. So if you find that the journal is the absolute last in the category, right, maybe 100 out of 100, maybe you don't really want to publish there, right? Because it's possible that the journal may not be continued to be indexed on Scopus because of the constant re-evaluation process. Okay, I think we've had a lot of good questions today. Thanks a lot, guys. I think it's about 12:15 right now. If you guys have any last questions, maybe I can take one last one. You can type in the chat box. Okay, that came out fast. Okay. So Pyran, you can probably ask the library on this. The library will be working with, I'll be working together with the library on this, and we'll come up with much more relevant topics, which hopefully you might find useful as well. So if you find that it's useful, please actually type in the survey form and let us know about this. Okay, if not, it's about 12:16 right now. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for spending about the past hour and quarter with me. For those of you who are asking about the certificates, you will get it after you complete in the survey as well as the code itself. You should be able to get a certificate from the link itself. Yeah. If not, thank you so much from Singapore. We are currently in another lockdown soon. So do be safe, everyone. Do take care. I'll see you around. Thank you.